Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video I am continuing the build of the Dancing Wings Fokker Dr1. The fuselage is as complete as it's going to be for the moment, and I've moved on to the tail section, the wing for the landing gear, and the lowermost wing. This is a very good kit. Everything just keys together great. The balsa parts are designed and fitted very nicely. For example, I just laid out the parts for the rudder. There's no glue. This is just held together by friction and snug fitting parts. So as you can see, it's quite precise. I will pin that down and glue that in a little bit. Right now I am starting with this section, the moving part of the rear stabilizer or elevator. So definitely pin everything down, make sure it's flat. You only get the one chance to make it flat. You might even take a ruler, like a metal straight edge, and lay it down across pieces as you tack stuff in place, just to make sure that you get a proper alignment and fit. The paper plans I have been folded in the box for a while, so they've got a lot of curves in them, and the plastic also, you know, wants to try to push up against the wood a little bit. So I'm doing everything I can to make sure that things glue straight. And like I said, taking a guide like this and just laying it down across different joints as you glue things, it helps the pins, and it helps you keep things oriented properly as you just tack glue. And then you can do a more thorough gluing once things are anchored in place. That's totally up to you. You could just lay it out like this, throw on a few pins, drop some glue on it, and call it done. I just want to make this as clean as possible, and if I build any variance between the left side and the right side, you're basically getting a little bit of a rear aileron effect, which you don't want. So making sure this is glued together properly is high priority. I've got this basically together, but away from this, because if I drop a little too much glue, I don't want the glue to wick through the joint, you know, just slide right across the plastic and wick into the next piece and potentially glue this to this. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to finish pinning this out, I'm going to glue everything up, and then I will move this piece out of the way. Once it's finished, I'll slide this piece in over the plans, throw on some pins, make sure everything is aligned properly, and then glue that together and then onto the rudder. So I don't think I need to demonstrate this process any further. You get the idea. There's a couple of slots here. These are going to be for control horns, just like there's a slot here for a control horn to be glued into. There's obviously a lot of forethought in the design and how things go together. You can even see the slots here, here, and here. Those are for these pieces here. So the stabilizer not only, you know, lays on this surface, but it actually keys to the fuselage. That's a very nice touch. You know, I wish there were more directions. That's the only thing this kit lacks, short of a detailed set of assembly instructions, a nice book. If you go back and you look at my build of the Chrysalis Light 2 meter sailplane, it comes with this book, and you know, every step along the way has photographs and detailed instructions of exactly how they want you to assemble things. It's really very handy, and a lot of manufacturers don't go to this trouble. If you're looking for a nice 2-meter glider, especially something that you might want to use for competition in RES, Rudder Elevator Spoiler, This is an excellent candidate. It is specifically made to compete in that class. It's extremely light and can be built to competition weight levels. It's also made in America. So I'm going to go ahead and do this process. If I come across anything interesting, I'll let you know as I go. And then I'm going to move on to the wing for the landing gear, and then onward. Now this is getting into an interesting part because the landing gear is kind of sprung. Let me see if I got the landing gear handy. Okay, if I recall correctly, the landing gear is the axle is gonna pass through here. Now it's not gonna anchor directly to this. It kind of like hangs off it. It's sprung to it, so it can have a certain amount of motion and flexibility. I'm gonna have to go over this carefully and give you as much detail as possible as to how this gets built, because there might be some tricky stuff to this. So we'll cover that later. And if you recall, in the last video, I had those round doublers, like the ones down here. I'm not sure. Let me bounce the camera here for a second. Okay. You can see them down here. Okay. Remember, there were a couple extras of those. There's one here, and then these two down here. That's 4, and there were 4 more right there on the plans. Let me move the camera. There is a round doubler. There is, let me just check this piece of the plan here. Nope, it does not mention this part number. There's no arrow indicating a number for the, I think it was F-22s or F-23s. In any event, this location here and the corresponding location on the opposite side of the wing here is where 2 of those are going to go, and I suspect the other 2 of the 8 will be for the section up here. So we'll see on that, but that's where I believe those are going to go. Tail surfaces are done. Everything fits nice. Everything's level. Rudder's good to go. So these I can just set aside for now. Okay, wing of landing gear. This is going to be interesting. Some of these carbon fiber rods are going to come into play. I'm not 100% sure how yet. For example, these 2 pieces look like they're going to fit in here and here. This is our axle. In my case, this was loose in the bottom of the box. I would have expected to have been in this bag with some other long pieces and some other wire. It may even have been, there was a hole in the bottom of the bag, so it may have fallen out in packing or in transit. But this is the axle. This is our leading edge. Look for the piece of carbon fiber that is the same width as the wing. All these carbon parts should be pre-cut. Doesn't look like they want us cutting things ourselves. Actually, I don't think these are going to go here. What I'm looking at is this piece of the plans right here, and it looks like there's a wider section and an intersection, and it looks like it, because it's the axle goes through there. My mind is telling me that should be round, and that maybe this axle passes through some tubing. I don't think that's the case, though. I think that's me misinterpreting the plans. That is a flat surface, even though it looks like it's jointed. You'll understand what I mean when you look at this more closely. It looks like these intersections are separate from each other, the way it's drawn. In any event, let me show you where to find your parts for this, because they're spread across several different pieces, and one of them is not marked, at least on mine. Okay, we have C8. Right here is the number. It's this piece right here. That is our trailing edge. Okay, then we have some C7s. The C7s are on this sheet right here. You can see one of them down here. It's actually stamped on the part with the C7. There's another C7 inside this piece here. C7 over here, C7 over here. I went ahead and marked those with a pencil, even though it's going to be obvious what they are once I pop them out. Okay, then we need C6 and C5. C6 is this piece right here, and as you can see, that's going to fill in there. The C7 plywood pieces are going to be these pieces here. Those are going to be verticals, so that's going to kind of box in this piece on either side. And then this piece right here, even though it's not marked, has to be C5. This one being C6, and as you can see, the cutouts, this piece is identical to this without the wider sections. I'm going to look a little more and make sure I haven't missed something, but F12 is this piece in here that went for the fuselage, and there are no other markings that would correspond to this. This is W10, 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 W8, 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 W10, W10, W10. C6 is for this. So there is no other markings that would tell you what this piece here is, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to assume that this is the piece that is going to go above the ribs while this one goes below them. I hope it's not the other way around. I'm going to look again at these little photos, see if I can't figure that out. Now, we have our ribs we got to cut out. The ribs are on this piece right here. I don't know why I set that aside. It's a lot of pieces on a lot of sheets. C1 and C1, C2 and C2, another C2 and C2. Okay, got to pop those out, or cut them out. Okay, get the C7s out, get these out, and then we also have 1, 2, 3, 4 C4s. Those are the inner ones. So I'm going to cut all these out and continue from there. Okay, came across another little idiosyncrasy, if you will. We have 4 C2s, but there's actually only 2 C2s and there's 2 C3s, but there are no C3s on the woods. There's no C3 numbered items, but they are all identical. So basically it's going to be C2 and another C2 in the place of C3. They are designed to work together with these pieces right here, like so. Okay, and so the first pair of C2s, we need 2 C7s here and here. This is our base piece. We're going to have a C1 and a C2 glued together. It's like a doubler setup. Okay, and the C1 kind of is an end cap for this piece, for this piece, for the carbon rod. So you want to make sure that you make a mirrored pair. In other words, you want one like that, and then you want one like this. If you make them the same, you're screwed, because you're not going to be able to split these pieces apart. So make sure you do it right, 100%. In fact, I would recommend this is the first thing you do. Build them side by side, not touching like I have them here, but you know, do them with slow zap if you got slow zap, so you make sure things are positioned. You know, use the rod as a centering point to make sure they're lined up, and then line up the edges and make the pair. Okay, that way you can move forward and you know that's done right. Okay, then I would recommend basically pinning things down, like with the tail section. So pin this in place, pin the trailing edge in place, start with the first outer doubler, you know, build up those two, build up that box section there. This will be one of the last pieces you put on, along with the carbon fiber rod will be the last two things you do. Start from the outer edge and work your way to the middle. So one thing we do have to help us figure all this out is a picture. Here is a fairly good detailed picture of unassembled and assembled. As you can see, there is no carbon fiber tubing, as I was speculating there might be. And the way this basically attaches is, once this is built, the landing gear is going to just plug in to these two box sections, and the rod will be run through these holes over top of the landing gear, and between the box section and this rod that anchors that wing to the landing gear. And I assume it's going to have a certain amount of movement to it. I was looking, when I was talking about this thing maybe having a little bit of spring to it, I was thinking about a much larger scale version of the DR1 that I saw that had a kind of a spring mechanism that allowed the axle to flex and the wing to it to move up and down within the wing. Instead of having round holes like these, they were slots that allowed that axle to move up and down a little bit and get a bit of a spring action, but that's not the case with this model. So again, make sure you build these as a mirrored pair, and then everything else should go together nicely. It's fairly simple from there on. So I'm going to start assembling. I may take a picture or two as I go, and then I will show you finished product. And if I come across anything else interesting along the way, I will let you know. Okay, there actually is a difference between the two C2s, or the four C2s. There's two on each side. The only difference is that the one that is going to be the doubler does not have the extra notch over here like this one does, because I glued it on this one by mistake. See, I make mistakes, it happens. I didn't realize that this piece here is smaller than the larger piece, so this is entirely open here. In fact, this probably is not going to get covered because the landing gear is going to be dropping down in here, so this may need to be mostly open. Might be able to cover this and cut a slot in the covering and then let the landing gear slide into it and the covering fold up around it. That might work. We'll see what happens. If you do make the mistake I made, it's not a problem. All you got to do is cut that little notch in one of the other pieces and you're set. So nothing is really glued except for the doublers at the moment. I'm just pinning everything in place. This is hard to assemble correctly if you wanted to use other than, you know, either fast or gap fill. If you wanted to do this with epoxy, very hard to get things together because you got to box everything together, pin it up in place, because everything is jointed, so it's, you know, it's a really messy process if you were trying to do it with epoxy. You can't do it one little piece at a time because the epoxy is going to flow into areas where you need other pieces to be. If you try to do all these pieces here at one time, the bottom and then the four sides here, you're going to have a tough time getting all this stuff anchored and squared and pinned flat without getting epoxy everywhere. So I recommend doing it this way. Tack things in place with the instant zap, and then fillet everything like we did on the fuselage, using the zap gap and hitting it with jet set to make those fillets. The doublers were hard to glue. For some reason, the wood just didn't want to stay together. I would put on the slow, clamp things together, and you know, even a few minutes later, it would start peeling back apart and stuff. It's maybe it's too late for me to do this. I did get it finally together. I ended up using thin and you know, working my way around the edges and doing the holes and such. I think the best way for you guys to go when you're doing these two ribs, you're gluing these doublers together, sand them a little bit because the wood is very smooth, almost polished, and it doesn't want to take for some reason. So you know, get some coarser sandpaper, maybe 120 or even 80 grit, and just rough it up a little bit, and that should make for a better gluing surface. So anyway, this is all ready to glue together, and the last thing I'll do is put on the leading edge. So I'm going to start gluing and then filleting, and you know how all that works, so nothing much to see except me repetitively dripping glue and then squirting jet. Well, the landing gear wing is finished. I ended up needing to trim, well, I'd say about 1 millimeter off of the carbon rod to fit it. I didn't want to stress these pieces outward, so I trimmed it as needed. And I filleted up these joints pretty good, maybe a little overkill, but I figured better more than less. Also filleted them on the outsides as well. This is going to take a lot of stress, these two boxes in particular right here. So we'll see how that goes. I tried fitting the axle through with the wire, and because of the way this is bent, it seemed like it wanted to tip nose up, tail down pretty steeply in relationship to how it mounts to the fuselage. So I may clamp like the bottom tip of this thing, like maybe this much of it, in a vise and bend both arms slightly, kind of rotating that triangle point to a more vertical position than the angles that it's at now, so that they drop down into the box a little better, and hopefully make this wing want to ride in a more parallel angle to the wing and fuselage angle. So I'll cross that bridge later though. So tail section done, wing for landing gear done. Now it's time to move on to this wing, and once I've got this together, flip the plans, build the two upper wings, and then we go into final assembly phase. I hope you've been enjoying the videos. I hope you've picked up some tips along the way. Maybe you've learned a couple tricks for building for yourself and working on your own kits. If you've got some information I don't have, you got some ideas, please feel free to write them into the comments. And if I get them in time, I do try to go through the comments quickly. I will get them into the next video or videos as things go. Well, thanks again for watching.
Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.